This is the Business Storytelling Show with Christoph Trapp. Named a top 20 storytelling podcast and a top 5% podcast globally, Christoph chats with thought leaders and experts to share tips and tricks that can help you tell your company's stories better to drive business results. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, live streamed on major social media channels, and part of the DB&A television network, available on most U.S. television sets and streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire. Here's Christoph with today's episode. Let's go.
Let's go, business storytellers. How's everyone doing? In case you didn't notice, I got my business storytelling podcast t-shirt on today. So way on brand here. Now, when we're talking about being on brand, style matters. Now, I can't say I got any style, but I'm talking about the style when it comes to writing, content creation. And so I got one of the experts. I think I can call her a style nerd. She called herself that earlier. I'm looking at the green room if I'm getting a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It looks good so far. But you know what? I stumbled into AP style. Just happened because I was a journalist, newspapers, that's what they used. There's plenty of other styles out there, style books as well. But you know why picking a style is important, in my opinion? So people don't just make up the rules. And if you've spent any amount of time around humans, they will make up the rules if you don't give them to them. That's just my opinion. Carmen Hill is today's guest. We're going to get her out of the green room here. A content strategist, content expert. She's been around the content marketing world for a long time. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And of course, you know Joe Polizzi, and I never mentioned this before. Joe is, of course, in the intro, and I think that's one of the few times when Joe did not wear orange. Oh. Did you notice that? Maybe you didn't.
Well, it went by kind of fast, but I thought, he looked like he was having a very good time. So
we did have a good time, but he did not wear orange and didn't go and change. So I think it's just fine. So the reason I asked you on the show, because I'm always looking for good topics, and AP style keeps coming up every once in a while. I actually wrote an article once, and it was something like Christoph Trapp, Vice President of Marketing, or it wasn't my name, but and I lowercased Vice President of Marketing. And people always ask, why would that be lowercased? That's the title. And of course, as we know, some marketing some corporate marketers make up styles, right? Because they start capitalizing crap that shouldn't be capitalized. Mm-hmm. So AP style had my back. And you openly profess your love for AP style. So tell us about that. What is that all about?
Well, so my history with AP style goes back all the way to high school, if you can believe that, to our high school journalism class. And then, in college as well, we were required to actually pass a test, not only for AP style, but for the house style, which was the Daily Texan style book, which were additions and exceptions to AP style. And you had to pass that test before you could write for the paper. So it's just been drilled into me from the get-go. And like you said, it gives you a safety net. So when those questions come up, you can go to the AP style book or whatever your house style might be, or, style book of record, and say, no, this is the way we do it because we've documented this and agreed upon it.
And what's interesting about style too is, so I listened to the Grammar Girl podcast. I don't know if you listen to her.
Love Grammar Girl.
She's awesome, right? And so she gets these questions about grammar, and I mean, I don't know how often her answer is, but it is sometimes. She goes, "That's not a grammar question. That's a style question. You need to decide what's your style. Whatever you pick, that's correct." Mm-hmm. So there is real value in having that. Now, how do you pick? I just pick AP style because that's what I've been using for longer than I would like to admit. But how do companies start? How do they pick, or should they just say, we'll do AP style and we'll learn it as we go? Or what's your recommendation?
I think a lot of it depends on the context that you're working in. I mean, AP style is a great default choice across the board for just about any industry. Another prominent style guide is the Chicago Manual of Style. And for certain things, that goes into a lot more depth that you might need depending on what your work encompasses. So it a lot of it just depends. But as marketers, or if you're a PR professional or you are an active journalist or blogger, then AP style is a good fallback default choice. And then if you need something that's not covered in the AP style book, you can go to another book like Chicago, or some other source. Sometimes if you're covering stories, or you're working in overseas where you maybe have different distinctions related to regionalisms or language, like UK spellings versus US American English spellings, that sort of thing. So that's where, too, a lot of times, your organization may need to have a house style guide that says our style book of record is the AP style book, but we also have our house style, which includes these additions, exceptions, etc.
Now, what's interesting too to me is, back in the day when I first started using AP style, we had the AP style book. Literally on every, you still have one right there. Literally on every journalist desk, right? And you just, but very different time. Just to give you guys an idea how long ago this was. I was a police reporter, and if I wanted to check my email, I would use an old school cell phone, call back into the office, and ask the administrative assistant if she could check my email for me. So there you go. That's how old. That's how long ago that is.
Let's not go there, Christoph.
Let's not go there. But what's really cool about the AP style book, I'm going to share my screen quickly here and show this to you. So you certainly can have the AP style book, but you can also follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and they share tips on there. And I follow them pretty religiously, and I always learn something new. So that's always good. I mean, you do that too, I assume, right? Check them out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And things change all the time. So you really do, you can't assume that because something was the correct style or the accepted style last year or a few years ago that it still is, because things evolve. That's one of the, one of the great things about having an online AP style has an online subscription service now, and they're actually only printing their hard copy of their book every other year now. That's new, just this year. But when you can just go online with a subscription and you can just type in whatever your question is, that's you learn quick. And that's another benefit of having a style guide, is when you come into those come across those questions where you're not sure, because sometimes even if you've been doing this a long time, there's nuance or ambiguity around something. So you can look something up quickly and get the answer without spending all of your time hunting down, what's the right way to do this.
Now, sometimes, so this one right here, for example, I really like this. The word admit may in some contexts give the erroneous connotation of wrongdoing. I agree with that. Some people would say to me, I might be a little bit of a nitpicker, if I go with some of those things, but it's good advice, right? Now, on the other side,
there's nothing wrong with being a nitpicker, Christoph. I think of myself as an editorial fuss budget, and I think it's okay. I think of that as, that's a good thing. That's not anything to apologize for. Somebody's got to be a nitpicker.
And I'm not sure, we have to watch the replay, but I don't know that I apologize for it, but I just called that out, that some people...
Okay. You admitted it.
I admitted it. That is, in some context, erroneous connotation of wrongdoing. Got it. Okay, well, you are holding me on task here. Now, sometimes the AP style book, however, is very controversial, like when they change things, right? I mean, I still remember the whole thing over when I was a journalist, you had to say, more than, and now you can say over. It's only one word. Here's the reality, my friends. AP style or not, we're online. We don't need to cut words. I mean, yes, cut words if they don't matter, but we don't need to cut words over space. I mean, that's not a thing anymore. But talk about the those instances when they have controversial changes and how strongly everybody reacts.
Oh yeah, and they announce these every year in the spring at the ACES conference, which is the Copy Editing Society, and it often is breaks news at these things. A big one that I remember was when they finally took the hyphen out of email, or when they finally lowercased internet and web. Those kinds of things where sometimes they're ahead of the curve on making those sorts of changes, and sometimes I think a lot of us would think, come on, get with it, you know. So that's one, and then I can't not mention the serial comma um, perennial controversy, which people love to argue about, and there's a little bit I think of maybe misunderstanding about what AP style actually says about it, which is that in a simple series, the example is red, white, and blue, where you don't need it for clarity, then it can be omitted. But if you do need it for clarity, then by all means include it. But people love fighting about this, and usually the examples of why you need it are a little bit absurd. Like no one's really going to be confused by something like I had eggs, toast, and orange juice for breakfast. I mean, really, is that really going to be confusing? But it is, I guess, we can have fun arguing it about it, but ultimately the answer is always clarity, and if it's unclear, then you should include it.
So, and that's really what it comes back to, right? They're trying to help us be clearer to our audience, which every content marketer should be their top goal to begin with.
Absolutely.
Right? There
Yeah,
was an
clarity
example
and
the other day.
precision.
Go ahead. What?
Clarity and precision. Sometimes
Clarity and
that's really important, especially when it comes to things like public health. That where a slight difference in the way something's expressed could make a really big difference.
Absolutely. So, but why are people so passionate about it? I mean, is it really because is it because they don't agree that it makes it easier for the audience? Or is it because they just need to have it their way?
I think that people feel passionately about it because part of it is habit and what you're used to. You can also get people who will argue passionately that you need two spaces between sentences, and that went out with the people will still argue passionately about it. So I don't necessarily think it's wrong or right. I've worked with colleagues who would say that the including the comma makes it easier because it's always right, it's never wrong. And there's some logic to that. I get that. And I respect those choices. I think of punctuation kind of like if you were writing music, and I think of a comma as a rest mark. It's not just a matter of the clarity, but also how you want someone to read something. And if you want to give them a pause or an interruption, then whether it's a comma or a semicolon or an em dash, then punctuation is what helps people read and understand things in the way that you intend. It injects rhythm into your writing. So if your intent is to have someone pause, then a comma is exactly what you need. If you want things to flow a little more fluidly, then leaving out excess punctuation helps comprehension and helps you communicate in the way that you want to.
Yeah, it's very interesting how so some of the changes I don't care about either way. Like when they took the hyphen out of email or lowercase internet, I'm just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like I'll do it. You know what I mean? But then voice dictation doesn't know it yet, so it's going to take a while for it to do it correctly. So, but like some of those things, I don't feel positively about them or negatively. Now, my question is, does it matter? And here's the reason what I mean by that. I do these live streams, and the amount of time I put into the live streams, into my editing on podcasts, has typically no input, has no influence on performance. Some of the least edited podcasts have had the most listens. Now, does style drive performance? And if it does, how?
Wow, that is a very good question. I think thinking about it from the audience point of view, which I think we always need to do, I think that it aids in comprehension. And I don't know about you, but if I'm reading something and there's inconsistencies or odd capitalizations or things like that, it trips me up, and I'm thinking, well, why is that capitalized, instead of focusing on the message or what the content is really about. So I certainly don't have any data to support one way or another, but just as a reader, and thinking about it from the audience point of view, the less obstacles, the fewer obstacles, I should say, that you put in front of an audience, then the faster you can get them to whatever it is that you want them to learn or think or feel or do. So, the idea is to remove any barriers, and style inconsistencies can create barriers. And from a marketer's point of view, from a brand point of view, which is kind of where you started with this, our style choices also reinforce our brand, our voice and tone. So if your style is very formal, then maybe you've got a title case headline style, and that's the distinction too between style versus grammar. For example, it's like, what are the choices you make about how you present the information? So whereas if you have a very conversational style, you might choose to have sentence case headlines, or just the word choices and the way that you choose to punctuate things may be determined by your brand voice and tone.
So you still have some work to do to figure that out and come up with that style, but you don't have to recreate the wheel for all the things that are already in the AP style book.
And there's a lot.
And there is a lot. So do you
Yeah.
still need to create your own style in addition to having the AP style book? Like, what comes to mind?
I'm a big fan of that. And like I mentioned, at the student newspaper at the University of Texas, we had an addendum that was the Daily Texan Style Guide. Places that I've worked where I've uh, been on the editorial team that was editing the content before we published it, or for clients even. And if you're working for clients, then you follow their style, obviously. But I usually create a Google Doc or some sort of shared document like that documents our source, our style book of record is AP style. If there's questions about how something is spelled, this is our dictionary of record, and you set that up front, and then say there may be words that are part of your organization or brand that aren't in the style book. So you might have product names, or might be industry terms that aren't covered. So you need to account for those additions that may not even be in the AP style book, but also things that are exceptions. It's like, yeah, we know AP style says you don't need that comma if it's a simple series, but we disagree. We really like having it, so our style is to include it. That's an exception. Or if, for example, you decided to, that you didn't need to hyphenate email long before they did, or if you're Adidas and your style for your brand name is a lowercase a, even if it's at the front of a sentence, then you're going to, have your own rules that are either in addition to or that supersede AP style.
Well, and at the end of the day, I don't have any data either, but if it's supposed to make things better for the audience, I would think we would want to do it. Now, I do know for a fact, and you guys know who you are, there's some of you who make mistakes in email on purpose. So you can send me the follow-up email and say, oh, we made a mistake. I know that happens. I know it for a fact. I never open them. I don't care if you made a mistake. I didn't open your first email.
That's nefarious. I haven't had that happen that I know of. Or maybe I'm not opening them either time.
But see, you never know, right? But people do that on purpose. And then there's not everybody, of course. And then there's the other one. I know people they claim they test typos and stuff like that. I saw one in an ad the other day, and I'm pretty sure they did that on purpose, to see if the typo would perform better. Now, at the end of the day, though, depending who you sell to, you might have us look at it and go, you don't even know how to spell the word. Like, why would I spend 30 grand?
I would have a problem with that.
Right? Yeah, me too. So, okay, so I don't know how I started with AP style. I don't remember if I studied it or just read through it or just like you learn as you go. But let's say you got an up and coming content strategist or content writer or whatever, and how do they learn AP style? How do you do that?
Gosh, that's a really good question, because I think that if you have had it as part of your workflow, and it's just part of your habit, if you have a question, they're like, oh, I'm going to go to the AP style book or look it up online that way. You may have stumped me on that one. I think you just have to, just like you would any other processes or policies or things that are important to the way that you do your work. I think that you introduce them to it and have the sort of conversation about why it's important, and this is how we do things. And these are the things that, when you submit a piece of writing, or a script or whatever it might be, that this is what we're going to the kinds of things we're going to be looking for, reviewing for, editing for. So it's, an expectation, just like any other uh, policy or guideline that you have as part of your work.
Except this one is a policy you should not ignore. I also don't remember. I don't remember how I learned it. I think it just kind of one by one it comes up, and when there is a question, you look it up, and I think that's kind of how it happened.
And sometimes there's legal implications for things too. If you think about it with, data privacy or whatever, if you don't have the proper language, or you're not articulating those policies in a way that's accurate and clear, then you can get in trouble, around that. So there's definitely, it's not just a brand thing. It's also sometimes, it can be really important for, just from a legal standpoint, or ethical, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, to make sure it makes sense to the audience. I wanted to show this to you guys quickly. We live stream to Amazon, and this is really, Carmen, you and I probably care about this more than anyone else. But I want to share this with you. So while we're live on Amazon, if you haven't checked that out, by the way, there's live streams now. It live streams on the Associated Press style book page. So there's the book. There's us
Wow.
down here. And so I think that is one of the coolest things ever. So Amazon
Maybe
certainly is
one of
kind
the
of
highlights of my life. This is a, definitely a peak experience.
to be on the Associated Press style book homepage.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, certainly I reached out because you are relatively vocal about AP style. And I know all kinds of people that use it, but they don't talk about it all the time. So tell me about, like, you have it in your Twitter profile. Like why is it so prominent?
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, I don't talk about it all the time, but when you think about things that are important to you, or the work you do, or what have you, then AP style is definitely something that is a big part of that. And it comes up on almost a daily basis. So that's why. I guess I didn't put that much thought into it, but it comes in handy when there are, disputes around things. And it's a good like I said, safety net. It's a go-to reference that saves time, and can sometimes save the grief associated with having to argue about things.
And it's much more precise than people Googling things. I know people do that. They say, okay, how do you spell it? And they Google it, and then they say, oh, I find it both ways,
Hmm.
because the
Right.
other.
Yeah. So you just have to decide what's our rule on that, and follow that consistently, so that your audience knows what to expect, and so that your team knows what the standard is in your organization.
Yeah, you bet. So Carmen, tell people how can they connect with you? I mean, show content. Of course, they can work with you. How do they work with you? Like, who's your perfect client?
My mantra is, I like doing cool work with cool people, and so it's if it's an interesting project, that's certainly high on my list, and working with people who I either can learn from or that I just enjoy spending time with. I definitely am in the B2B space. I have most of my background's been in technology. These days I'm doing more in like more general business consulting topics like finance and accounting and compliance and digital transformation. I think everybody's talking about that. But yeah, probably my website's chillcontent.com. My email's carmen@chillcontent.com, and I'm also on Twitter, like you mentioned, at Carmen Hill, and on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And you know what? I think people appreciate how important it is to actually have that experience, right? To make it fun, to learn things, and I mean, have fun. I think that's people forget about that. Chillcontent.com. Did I type that in correctly on the fly while I was talking?
Yes,
Okay.
you did. Yes.
That's half the battle. Carmen, it was great to have you on the show. I really appreciate you giving us the scoop on the AP style book. And so how about every 2 years? Is that enough, by the way, to come up with a new
They
update?
update it on a much more frequent basis on their online. So in the subscription for an individual is very reasonable. I think it's like $27. And if you have a bigger team, then you have subscription models that are obviously bigger than that, but it's very reasonable, and it's a go-to. I've got that bookmarked, and I use it almost every day.
And so $27 a year?
Yeah.
So very reasonable. Fantastic. Carmen, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was fun talking about AP style.
Absolutely. Thanks.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review our show on your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to share this episode with your networks. We appreciate you. Until next time, let the best stories win.